They thought they could take everything from me, my house, my life. But I was already one step ahead. My son Daniel found that out on a wet Thursday morning in Asheville, North Carolina, standing in my front yard with rain dripping off his expensive coat while two deputies watched him shake the locked door handle of the house he thought was already his. I was sitting inside at the kitchen table, calm as church glass, holding a cup of black coffee with both hands. I could hear him outside yelling, "Dad, open this door right now." But I did not move. That house had been mine for 43 years. My wife, Ruth, picked the yellow paint for the kitchen. My daughter Emily took her first steps beside the fireplace. Daniel carved his initials under the porch rail when he was 9 years old, back when he still looked at me like I was someone worth loving. Ruth died in that upstairs bedroom 5 winters ago. After that, the house got quiet in a way that settled into my bones. I learned the sound of the furnace clicking on at night. I learned which floorboards groaned when the wind came down from the mountains. I learned how loneliness can sit across from you at supper and still leave the chair empty. Daniel started visiting more after Ruth passed. At first, I was grateful. He brought groceries, fixed the gutter, checked my mail. His wife, Marla, smiled too much and touched my shoulder like I was already fragile. They called me Pop, in that soft voice people use when they want something. Then the papers started showing up. "Just practical stuff," Daniel said one Sunday, sliding a folder across my table. "Estate planning, medical authority, makes things easier." I read slowly, but I read every word. Buried inside was a power of attorney broad enough to strip me down to my socks. Another document mentioned future property transfer for care purposes. He had even marked where I should sign with little blue tabs. I looked at my son and said, "You think I'm too old to understand this?" He leaned back and gave me a sad smile. "No, Dad. I think you're too proud to admit you need help." That sentence hurt worse than if he had slapped me. After that, the visits changed. My checkbook disappeared from the drawer, then reappeared 2 days later. Neighbors stopped waving like they used to. Reverend Collins called and asked if everything was all right because Daniel had told folks I was confused lately. Then Emily called me crying from Raleigh. "Dad," she whispered, "Daniel said you don't want me coming around anymore." I sat very still. "I never said that," I told her. There was silence on the line, and in that silence I heard the first crack in the lie they were building around me. That night, I went down to the basement and opened Ruth's old cedar chest. Under her quilts was a metal lockbox Daniel did not know existed. Inside were deeds, bank records, letters, and one sealed envelope with Marla's name written on it in handwriting I recognized. Ruth's handwriting. And what she had left inside that envelope made my hands go cold. I did not open the envelope right away. I sat there in the basement with that box on my lap while rain tapped softly against the little window near the ceiling. My hands were trembling, not from fear exactly, from recognition. Ruth had always seen things before I did. Small shifts in people, tiny fractures under the surface. By the time I finally opened it, my coffee upstairs had gone cold. Inside was a letter dated 8 months before she died. "Harold, if you're reading this, then Daniel and Marla finally showed you who they really are. I warned you gently because I knew you loved him too much to hear it plainly. But I saw the way they looked at this house after my diagnosis. I saw the way Marla asked about insurance policies while I was still sitting in the room. Protect yourself. Do not sign anything without an attorney present. And if they ever try to force you out, remember the cabin. I read those lines 3 times. The cabin. Nobody knew about it except Ruth and me. Back in 1978, before the children were born, we bought 6 wooded acres outside Bryson City from an old veteran who needed cash fast. Tiny hunting cabin, no electricity at first, just a stove, creek water, and silence. Over the years, we fixed it up little by little. It stayed in Ruth's maiden name because we never saw a reason to change it. Daniel had been there twice as a child. Emily never even knew it existed. At the bottom of the letter was one final sentence. They will mistake your kindness for weakness. Let them. I folded the paper carefully and slid it back into the envelope. Then I heard footsteps upstairs. Daniel. He had his own key. I stayed still in the basement shadows while he walked through my kitchen calling my name like a man checking an empty motel room. Dad? Cabinet doors opened, drawers slid out, then silence. A minute later, I heard him upstairs in my bedroom, searching. Something changed inside me then, quietly, completely. I realized my son was no longer waiting for me to die. He was preparing for it. The next morning, I drove downtown to see Walter Griggs, an attorney I'd gone fishing with for nearly 30 years. His office sat above an old pharmacy near Pack Square. Smelled like dust and old paper. Walter listened without interrupting while I laid the documents across his desk. When he finished reading, he leaned back slowly and said, "Harry, your boy's setting up guardianship groundwork." I stared at him. What does that mean? It means somebody's building a case that you're mentally declining. Once that starts, they control your finances, medical decisions, eventually, the property. My stomach turned cold. Walter opened a folder and tapped a page. 3 separate calls were made about your mental state over the last 4 months. By who? He looked at me carefully. Your son. For a moment, I could not breathe right. I kept thinking about Daniel at 12 years old, sitting beside me on Lake Julian holding his first fishing rod. Kept thinking about teaching him to shave before prom. Kept thinking about the night Ruth died when he cried against my shoulder like a little boy again. And somehow, that made this worse. Walter lowered his voice. You need to move fast now. Outside the office window, church bells rang somewhere downtown. Then my phone buzzed. A text from Marla. We're coming by tonight with someone who can help discuss your future living arrangements. I read it twice. Someone, not asking, telling. And that was the moment I finally understood what that scene in my front yard was really going to become. That evening, I turned off every light in the house except the one above the stove. I wanted them uncomfortable. Rain rolled across Asheville in slow gray sheets while I sat at the kitchen table waiting. Ruth's letter rested beside me like a loaded pistol. The old grandfather clock in the hallway ticked loud enough to feel. At exactly 7:12, headlights swept across the front windows. 3 people got out of the car. Daniel, Marla, and a woman carrying a leather folder. I opened the door before they knocked. Dad, Daniel said carefully, this is Susan Keller. She's a senior care consultant. The woman smiled at me the way funeral directors smile. I stepped aside without a word. They sat around my kitchen table like they belonged there. Susan spread pamphlets across the wood Ruth and I had refinished ourselves back in 1984. Mr. Whitaker, she began softly, your family is concerned about your safety living alone. I almost laughed. Safety? Daniel pointed toward the staircase. You fell last month. I slipped carrying laundry. You forgot your blood pressure pills twice. I am 78, not brain dead. Marla folded her hands. Nobody's attacking you, Harold. I noticed she stopped calling me Dad months ago. Susan opened the folder. There are wonderful assisted communities nearby. Full medical support, transportation, daily supervision. I don't need supervision. Daniel sighed hard through his nose. Dad, please stop making this difficult. That word sat in the room like smoke. Difficult. Not grieving. Not lonely. Not human. Just difficult. Then Susan slid a paper toward me. Voluntary Transitional Residency Agreement. Already filled out. My name typed neatly at the top. Move-in date scheduled for 3 weeks away. I looked at Daniel slowly. You already picked the date? His eyes shifted away for half a second. That was answer enough. Marla leaned forward gently. We're trying to avoid a bigger process later. There it was. The threat beneath the kindness. I could feel Ruth beside me then, calm, watching. I folded my hands. And if I refuse? Nobody answered immediately. Finally, Susan cleared her throat. Your son may pursue legal conservatorship if there are concerns regarding competency. The room went dead quiet. Daniel stared at the table. Coward. He could not even look me in the eye while they discussed taking my life apart. Something inside my chest hardened right there. Not anger anymore. Something colder. I stood slowly and walked to the sink. Rain streaked the dark kitchen window over the faucet. For a moment, nobody spoke behind me. Then Daniel said quietly, Dad, this house is too much for you now. I turned around. You mean too much for me? Or too much money for you? That landed. Marla stiffened immediately. Daniel's face darkened. That's not fair. No. I walked closer. Then tell me why you already spoke to 3 people about declaring me incompetent. Silence. Susan looked confused. Mr. Whitaker, I wasn't aware. Of course you weren't, I said. Daniel shot up from the chair. You went digging through my private conversations? Private? I barked out a laugh. You're trying to bury me alive in paperwork. Marla stood too now. Harold, calm down. Do not tell me to calm down in my own house. The storm outside cracked loud against the windows. For 1 second, nobody moved. Then Daniel said the ugliest thing he had ever said to me. You haven't been right since Mom died. That one hit deep. Deeper than the papers. Deeper than the lies. Because part of me feared it might be true. The room blurred for a second. My hands shook. And that was when I noticed it. Marla watching me carefully. Not worried. Observing. Waiting. Like she hoped I would explode. Because if I did, they would finally have proof. That realization chilled me clear to the bone. So instead, I smiled. Small. Calm. Controlled. And that smile scared them more than shouting ever could. I looked directly at my son and said, You should both leave now. Daniel hesitated. Then his eyes drifted past me towards the hallway, toward Ruth's old painting hanging beside the stairs. And I saw it. Not grief, not concern, calculation. He was already imagining the house without me in it. Then he said quietly, almost under his breath, You have no idea what's already in motion. I did not sleep that night. Every sound in the house felt different after Daniel left. the refrigerator humming in the kitchen, pipes knocking softly in the walls, wind brushing the porch screen. It all sounded temporary somehow, like the house itself knew strangers were circling it. At 2 o'clock in the morning, headlights slowed outside, not passing by, stopping. I stayed still in the dark living room and watched through the curtain. A black SUV sat across the street with its lights off. After a full minute, it pulled away. The next morning, my bank called. A young man named Trevor spoke carefully, too carefully. "Mr. Whitaker, we noticed unusual inquiries regarding your accounts." "Inquiries from who?" A pause. "Your son provided documentation stating he may soon assume financial oversight responsibilities." I felt my jaw tighten. "He what?" "He requested preliminary access procedures in the event of cognitive decline." Cognitive decline, like I was already halfway gone. I thanked the man politely, hung up, and sat at the kitchen table staring at the wall for nearly 10 minutes. Then I called Emily. She answered on the second ring. "Dad?" I had not heard her voice shake like that since Ruth's funeral. "Emily," I said quietly, "I need you to listen carefully and not interrupt." By the time I finished explaining everything, she was crying openly. "Oh my God. Daniel told me you were forgetting things. He said you accused neighbors of stealing mail. He said you were getting paranoid." I closed my eyes, piece by piece. That was how they were doing it. Small lies, quiet ones, just believable enough. "He's building a story," I said. Emily whispered, "Dad, there's something else." I waited. Marla's cousin works at a care facility outside Hendersonville. Cold spread through my chest. Not coincidence. Planning. Emily drove up that afternoon through heavy rain. When she stepped through the front door, she hugged me so hard my ribs hurt. "You look fine," she kept saying against my shoulder. I almost laughed at that. Fine. Such a small word for a man watching his own children divide him up like furniture. We spent hours going through documents at the dining room table. Bank records, insurance forms, property tax notices. Emily noticed things I had missed. Daniel had already contacted a realtor 3 weeks earlier. There was an email printed inside one folder discussing post-transition property valuation. Post-transition. Not if. When. Emily looked sick reading it. He already planned to sell the house. I nodded slowly. That evening, while she cooked soup in the kitchen, I went upstairs to Ruth's closet. Her sweaters still hung there untouched. Lavender sachets still rested in the drawers she used. I sat on the edge of the bed holding one of her cardigans to my face. And for the first time since all this started, I cried. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just quiet old man crying with nobody there to see it. Because betrayal from strangers hurts your pride. But betrayal from your own blood does something worse. It rewrites your memories. Downstairs, I heard Emily suddenly stop moving. Then her voice, "Dad." Something in her tone made my stomach drop instantly. I walked downstairs. 2 sheriff deputies stood at my front door. And behind them, Daniel, holding papers in his hand. Daniel would not look me in the eye. The deputies stood awkwardly on the porch while rainwater dripped from the brim of one man's hat onto my floorboards. "Mr. Whitaker," the older deputy said carefully, "your son filed a wellness petition with the county court. We're required to perform an evaluation." Evaluation, like I was livestock. Emily stepped forward immediately. "This is insane. Look at him." Daniel snapped. "Emily, stay out of this." She turned on him so fast I barely recognized her. You tried to have Dad declared incompetent behind our backs? He's not safe here anymore. No, she hissed. You're just in a hurry. The deputies exchanged looks. They had seen families like ours before. Everybody had. The older deputy asked me simple questions. My birth date. The president. What day it was. I answered calmly. Then Daniel made his mistake. He interrupted me twice, trying to clarify my answers. The deputy finally looked at him and said, "Sir, let your father speak for himself." That shut him up. For the moment. After 20 minutes, the deputies left with no action taken. One of them quietly handed me his card before stepping off the porch. "Call if you feel pressured," he murmured. Pressured. Such a polite word for what this had become. Daniel stayed behind after the patrol car disappeared. Rain hammered the porch roof while Emily stood rigid beside the stairs. Then my son finally dropped the mask. "You think you've won something?" he said coldly. "You think holding on to this place changes reality? This place is my reality." "No," he snapped. "This house is an asset." The word echoed through me. Asset. That was all Ruth's kitchen was now. All our Christmas mornings. All the birthdays. All the nights we sat on that porch swing during thunderstorms. Just numbers to him. Emily stared at her brother like she no longer knew him. Then Daniel said the thing that explained everything. "All my debt is tied to this." Silence. There it was. Not greed alone. Desperation. His business had been failing for years. I knew he struggled after the construction market slowed, but not this bad. Not enough to gamble with my life. "I took loans," he admitted quietly. "Second mortgages. Investors. I promised them money was coming once the property transferred." My stomach turned. "You promised my house before I was even dead?" Daniel ran both hands through his wet hair. "You don't understand how bad it got." "No," I said softly. "I understand perfectly now." Marla had not pushed him into this. They were drowning together. And I suddenly remembered something Ruth once said after Daniel borrowed money years ago. "He's terrified of failing, Harold. Terrified men do dangerous things." Daniel stepped closer. "Dad, if this falls apart, I lose everything." I looked at my son for a very long time. Then I finally told him the truth. "You already lost everything." His face twisted hard after that. Not sadness, hatred, real hatred. And then he made the biggest mistake of his life. "You think you're clever because of that cabin?" Every nerve in my body went cold. Emily looked confused instantly. "What cabin?" Daniel realized too late what he had done. I stepped toward him slowly. "How do you know about the cabin?" Nobody moved. Rain thundered outside. Daniel's breathing changed. Then Marla's voice echoed in my memory from months earlier. "Maybe he keeps things hidden somewhere. The basement. The missing checkbook. The nights Daniel came by unannounced. He had been searching the house. Searching for Ruth's documents. Searching for the cabin. Because somehow they already knew it existed. And in that exact moment, I understood what Ruth had really been trying to warn me about in her letter. This was never just about my house. It was about what was buried underneath that cabin in Bryson City. Daniel backed away from me like he had already said too much. Emily looked between us, confused and frightened. "What cabin? Dad, what is he talking about?" I kept my eyes locked on my son. "How do you know about Bryson City?" His face had gone pale now, not angry anymore, cornered. Finally he muttered, "Marla found paperwork months ago." Months ago, while pretending to help clean after Ruth's funeral. I suddenly remembered Marla alone upstairs for nearly an hour the day we buried my wife. She had claimed she was organizing clothes for donation. She had been searching. Daniel swallowed hard. Dad, listen to me carefully. If those papers are still there, people are going to come looking. People. Not banks. Not lawyers. People. A deep, sick feeling opened in my stomach. Then headlights exploded across the front windows. All three of us turned. Black SUV. The same one from the night before. Two men stepped out. Neither looked local. One stayed near the vehicle while the other walked slowly toward the porch in a dark coat despite the pouring rain. Daniel whispered, "Jesus Christ." "You know him," I said. He didn't answer. That was answer enough. The knock came 3 times. Slow. Heavy. Emily grabbed my arm. "Dad, call the police." But Daniel suddenly stepped in front of the door. "No cops." "Why not?" His breathing was ragged now. "Because they think he hid the money." Silence swallowed the room whole. "What money?" Emily whispered. I looked at Daniel. And finally, the truth came out. 23 years earlier, before Daniel started his business, before Marla, before any of this, I helped my younger brother Frank disappear. Frank had worked bookkeeping for a trucking company tied to the Dixie Mafia, running through Tennessee and western North Carolina back in the 90s. Cash laundering, stolen freight, illegal gambling money. Frank stole from them before he vanished. Nearly $400,000. He came to me terrified, one night with bruises on his ribs and blood on his shirt. Ruth begged me not to get involved, but he was my brother. So I hid the money temporarily beneath the cabin foundation until Frank could return for it. He never did. 3 months later, they found his body in the French Broad River. And after that, I never touched the money again. Daniel's voice shook. I found Frank's old letters after Mom died. I thought if I could get the money, I could fix everything. You brought criminals to my house? I didn't mean for this to happen. Another knock. Harder now. The doorknob rattled once. Emily was crying quietly. I moved toward the hallway closet and pulled down Ruth's old shotgun from the top shelf. Daniel stared at me in horror. Dad? Outside, the man on the porch spoke calmly through the door. Mr. Whitaker, we just want to talk. Rain hammered the roof. The grandfather clock ticked behind us. And then, somewhere upstairs, glass shattered. Thank you for spending this time with me. If this story touched your heart in any way, write a few words in the comments. I always read them. And if you enjoy quiet, emotional stories like this, you're always welcome here.